go ahead. Thanks so much for joining us, Lili, and so excited to see your event.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So hi, everyone. My name is Lili Flanigan, and I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about grassroots organizing and legislative advocacy. So first, once we can change the slide here, a little bit about me. I'm a current student at New York University. I am the former chair of the West Slope Youth Vote program here on the western slope of Colorado. I love to hike. I love to paddleboard and ski. On the left, you can see my sweet dog, which I thought was pretty relevant to this presentation as well. And I'm really excited to be here. And, you know, I always hate when presenters sort of show everything strictly, business and whatever, something that I think is an important theme throughout, what I'm going to talk to you all about today is that this process, the legislative process in democracy, is meant to be accessible to you as a regular person, not just a political operative. So, I thought it was important to, show you a little bit of me and my family and some of the wonderful people I work with. So next. So some things that by we here, I mean, the other students that I have been fortunate enough to work with over the last few years. We've registered our peers to vote, spoken at local events, met with our state and federal representatives, and it really has been a whirlwind of a journey. Now, all of the students that you see here in these photos are freshmen to seniors in high school, at least, we were at the time. Jonathan here on this side of the photo with Representative Mark Catlin. She is now a student at Harvard, and Annika and August here in the middle are applying to their colleges now. So, these are students before they ever went into higher education, starting to make a difference in their communities. So we have gone on lobby trips, we have done community outreach, and really been able to bond with each other as, friends and, students who really want to make a difference. And that could be anybody from any background at any time in their lives. So I want to first talk a little bit about what is democracy. We hear that word all the time. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a buzzword, but we hear it all the time. And it's really just something that we are taught is what our government is and what the right kind of government is. So democracy is a type of government where the power is given to the people. And, different political philosophers have gone back and forth. The United States is a democratic republic. So we have sort of channeled the power of the people into specific districts and specific representatives to sort of filter the public opinion so that hypothetically, it would be easiest to sort of move the country in the direction in which the people decide. So grassroots democracy, stemming off of that, is the actual involvement on a small scale in your community. So that could be your city council race, that could be running a campaign to have a citywide measure to make sure you have a community center in your town. There's so many different ways, and we're going to get into them in just a minute. So many different ways to be involved in the concept of grassroots democracy, because really you hear grassroots support, grassroots donors, whatever, and all these political campaigns, but grassroots just means the people, these multiple individuals coming together on a small scale to create a bigger level of change. So what is your community? It could really be anything. Studies actually show that when young people are presented the word community, they're less engaged and less interested because it's sort of like a 30 to 40-year-old, organizing buzzword. But your community is very important. It could be your school, your town, your city, your neighborhood, anywhere where you're involved, and the welfare of that place or that community means your own welfare as well. So I wanted to give a bit of an example of some digital change making. In the era of COVID, everything has just been mass chaos, especially, you know, all of these big strikes and the ways we exercise our freedom of speech. All of those have really deeply shifted. And so I, you know, wanted to give you a little bit of an example of something that we have done to sort of give people an idea of what they can do to engage in their own grassroots democracy on a digital level, which really before the pandemic had never been done before. You know, I'm sure you and I would rather go to an in-person protest or rally or event, you know, than a virtual one. But we wanted to engage young people for our community for Earth Week. Now, this year, this past Earth Day, April 22nd, was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which has been a long series of people just trying to make change for the betterment of our environment and for climate change. So we wanted to, within our own organization, our community here in the Grand Valley, engage young people. So we utilized a peer-to-peer social media campaign, and we reposted the participation of community members. And this sort of helped on their own sort of niche online communities start to engage. And we partnered with the University Sustainability Council. So we used this institutional support that we knew we would have to sort of bring people together. And it definitely made an impact. We had people posting photos of their hikes, of their vegetarian meals, of, you know, they're witnessing the workshop and their plants. And all of these things sort of brought people together in this digital space in which it never had been done before. And our messaging, we were very careful that we placed importance on the COVID crisis, because even though the climate crisis is coming for us really, we also had to be mindful that, you know, COVID-19 is taking a real and tangible toll on people. So this is just one example of a possibility of utilizing grassroots democracy. And you might ask, well, how does this fit into the idea of democracy? Well, a big protest or a big rally is something that moves public opinion in the eyes of those who represent us, those who make the decisions, and, you know, different media outlets that are meant to sort of express what is going on in the world, in the countries, communities, states, whatever it happens to be. And so we wanted to make sure that in the digital space, we were still able to uplift these messages and uplift our community's voices to make sure that those people who are representing us in our democracy heard our voices through our grassroots organizing that we did digitally. So a little bit more about the webinar, because I have gotten some questions about webinars before. Basically, we had a set of webinars. So we had one set and a second set, and we had a really diverse group of people. And these conversations that are prompted by different webinars or, you know, panels or whatever it happens to be, you know, like Annalise has put together here, having a really diverse set of backgrounds, experiences, opportunities has really allowed us as young people and those people watching to sort of consider these maybe differences of opinion or different points that may be raised, because all of these people are just amazingly knowledgeable. So you can see here on the slide the different people that we had, and it truly was a pleasure to have all of them in that space. You know, some of them who I considered good friends of mine. So we spoke about climate concerns, you know, all different levels. So really, when you want to put together an event to affect grassroots change, you have to consider diversity, and you have to consider different backgrounds and different issues, because intersectionality is more important than ever. And, you know, these webinars are a really great way to engage elected officials, but also engage, you know, younger people or engage different demographics. And they're a really good tool for participating in grassroots democracy and all of those things in that realm. So here's sort of what we presented to people. You know, individual action, just I'll give you the lens of climate change and environmental issues. So composting, houseplants, you know, it seems like really, really small things. And I think we all know at this point that corporations and big businesses are the ones, you know, creating a lot of this negative change. But individual action sort of allows people to participate. But more importantly, I want to talk about how to organize, because I've just given you an example of, some somewhat digital of a different organization. And, I think it's really important for us to consider, how do I take that first step as a student, as a college student, as an adult, as, someone who works in a corporate office, whatever. Anybody can do it. So one of the first things is forming a team. So forming a team of people that you are passionate about. It could be 2 or 3 other people, and meet with them to sort of have discourse and discuss, what's the messaging that we want to put out? What is the very specific kind of message, but also the specific event that we want to do and why. And as you do that, you can sort of start putting out feelers in your community, seeing who is engaged online, who's engaged in what you do, and how can you utilize that interest. And then if you've ever done project management or whatever, make a timeline, make a plan, share documents, all of that good stuff. But taking that first step really can be scary, and I think it's important for me as an organizer to emphasize that it's absolutely possible and easy. To sort of put this together. It just takes time and effort and practice, but it's worth it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 failed events, they're still making a difference, even if you think they're failures because just a few people show up. And it'll help you sort of move forward in your process of being an organizer within your community, and creating grassroots change. Let's see. So again, digital organizing, you want to prompt individual action using social media, software, different tools, hashtags and tagging. But those are little nitty gritty things that, you could probably find on BuzzFeed article or whatever. So the most important thing, just engaging your community, reaching out to organizations, and especially involving young people and young women, that is what is going to be affecting the most grassroots change. And that's why I want to really emphasize to all of you watching that it is, you are the people that are supposed to be making this change, because it's your future at stake with whatever issue it happens to be. It doesn't just have to be climate change. So, these things are intertwined. Democracy is morphed through activism and community organizing. So writing a letter to your legislator, or, sort of starting a social media campaign or whatever it happens to be, those things are what's important. And those things get you, to the places you want to be. If you want to be the one having a conversation with Representative Kennedy's legislative staff, you can, it's just taking that first step. Because that's something, honestly, I never thought I would be doing. So, just some other examples. I think another thing that a lot of these photos show is that I have the most fun and I feel the most passionate when I'm with other people that want to do this work. But not everybody has that sort of activist community or whatever it happens to be. And that's something that you really can find online with other with other organizations, other groups, whatever it happens to be. I do want to acknowledge that this sort of digital space is not accessible for everybody. We have made some sort of accommodations for, those who, can't hear, can't see. Technology does wonderful things in that way, but there's also an economic discrepancy. Not everybody has their own laptop, not everybody has their own phone, and that can make organizing very difficult. So I do want to acknowledge that, and here's to hoping that more organizing will bring that positive change in those necessary devices to the people that need them. Because I don't know, some political philosopher at one point said, diversity of opinion means progress. I should probably look that up, but someone can email me that question later. And that's where that change is going to come from. So the more people who have access to the tools that they need to organize, that's really where the change is going to come from. So I want to quickly shift gears into legislative advocacy. And this is sort of the part where, you and your notebook that you maybe have out can sort of start interacting with the different issues that you really care about and that you want to make change in. So like I said before, the legislative process is accessible. And some people hear the term lobbyist and they sort of start vomiting. And, while I personally believe that, corporate lobbying and those sorts of things are huge problems, community advocates performing the act of lobbying is something that is what's important in creating legislative change. So a registered lobbyist, basically, if you work for, say, a public affairs firm, you have to register usually with your Secretary of State. You have to make sure that your salary is transparent, your political donations are all transparent, and there's a lot that goes in there. And in the state of Colorado, where I live, actually, registered lobbyists cannot go on the House or the Senate floor. They can only stay in the lobby right outside the doors. So there are definitely lines with those, but community advocates who lobby for an issue are very different and they have different privileges. So the definition, lobbying is the act of communicating with legislators and public officials to change or influence their support of legislation. So I actually took that definition from a workshop that I gave with a wonderful lobbyist friend of mine who worked for a nonprofit organization, for which I care deeply. So creating legislative change requires lobbying on all sorts of levels. Like I mentioned, the community center earlier, that's where you as a community advocate have to speak and lobby your city council members to vote yes on whatever funding, whatever ballot measure, whatever it happens to be. On the state level, which is something I'm going to talk about probably the most out of all of these, on the state level, that's where you speak to your state representatives. And again, the state process is probably the most accessible, I would say, at least here in the state of Colorado. I think we're very fortunate. So on the state level, I want to just give you an example of how I know that my state works, and I'll soon explain sort of how you can figure that out for yours as well. But if you live in Colorado, you're in luck because I'm going to explain it to you. So basically, the things that you need to know are bill titles, how many times it's read, when you're able to affect that change that you want to make. So in Colorado, each legislator pulls 5 bill titles every session. And so if I am Senator Flanigan, I can be the primary sponsor for 5 bills, whether that be a gun violence bill, a mental health bill, a climate change bill, and 2 others. And I can be the primary sponsor for just 5. I can be a co-sponsor, or I can be, a minor sponsor for others, but I can only pull 5 each session, which is once a year. The bill is read 3 times in front of the full chamber. So we say first reading, second reading, third reading. Third reading is when it gets voted on. And they don't come out. They, make sure they're in and vote, and they don't come out into the lobby. But in between readings, they read the full bill text, and then the body determines which committee it goes to, and then it goes into the committees and it's heard by the committee, and they're offered amendments sometimes from different legislators. And politics and those sorts of icky things definitely play a role in some of the amendments. Sometimes people attach amendments to make sure that someone else's bill is killed or whatever, and that's a whole another mess of nuance and craziness that I cannot even get into, but that's what the registered lobbyists are for. They get to figure that out for themselves. But during these hearings, the committee hearings, community testimony happens. So each state, again, has a different process, but this testimony, for example, I live 4 hours and 1 mountain range away from where the state capitol is, but I've been able to testify both in person and to testify in a virtual setting, where I was able to go to the university and sit down and sort of be actually on a Zoom call. This was before COVID, so that's crazy. But I was able to be on a Zoom call and be broadcasted in the committee meeting there in Denver, so that there wasn't that barrier. So these stages, you sort of have to analyze those for yourself and determine where you can make the change. So for me, I can organize groups of people and community groups to testify for or against a bill, or I can have specific community members or community groups speak to individual legislators. And if they're voting no on a bill we want them to vote yes on, for example, mental health reform, we can directly speak to them and, sort of try and convince them why they should be voting yes, for these specific reasons. And it's worth remembering that as much as it may not seem like it, these people work for you. They're paid by you, and they have an obligation to hear you, and it could become a big news story if they don't. So that's sort of the politics thing playing into it. But that's sort of the relevant thing, is that you can be involved in every stage, even with just one email, because I have been personally told by one of our state representatives that she had said, I have actually changed my mind on a bill multiple times after constituent letters or community testimony. And I would have never expected to hear that from her specifically. So just know that it absolutely does have a big difference. So when you are being an advocate for your community, the first thing is connecting with your legislators. They're people too. They have families, they have husbands, wives, partners, their own lives, hobbies. And so when you get to know their interests, their legislative priorities and regular priorities, you can explain your issue or your bill within that context and sort of try and help them understand your side of the story. Now, which again, I'll show you this next thing in a minute, but bill titles in Colorado are determined. This is Senate Bill SB 17 for the year 2017, and it could be like number 107 or whatever it happens to be. So they're just not random, but letters and numbers, they'll get convoluted in their heads, and they have to vote on all of these and hear all of these. So providing background, resources, pamphlets, one-pagers, that can be something that can really help you get your point across, and they can hand that physical paper or forward that email to their legislative staff, and that can help them sort through it and make sure that it's a priority to them as well. And when they start feeling passionate about something, and here comes the politics again, but when they start feeling passionate about something, they will talk to their peers. They'll, on whatever side of the aisle it is, they'll speak to other legislators, those who they're connected with, those who they're not. And that really matters. And also when you provide a personal connection to the issue or a community connection, that's sort of where they start to understand your point of view. Because as a community advocate, you want better for your community. And so you just really have to get that point across, because not all of them are evil. So if you have a notebook, a Google Doc, whatever out, write down maybe 3 or 4 of your key issues of things that, are important to you. They could be broad, they could be small. Recently, we had a ballot measure about wolf reintroduction in Colorado. So maybe wolf reintroduction is you're for or against. It's a big issue. Something as broad as climate change, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, whatever it happens to be, write those down and sort of save those in either a notebook or a Google Doc. So you can sort of come back to them as you start browsing through different bills. So now take out your notebook or your Google Doc, and hopefully you're following along with me. If you're not, it's all good. You can think of it in your head. But sort of write down or think about, what does your issue area look like in your county and in your state? So here in Grand Junction, Colorado, it is a fairly red area, and abortion is, this county has historically, and probably will for a very long time, voted for restrictions on abortion. And if that was my big issue area, I would say, well, in my county, it seems that, these Republican legislators that were elected by my Republican county are likely going to be against or for these abortion restrictions. So, how do you then translate that into, telling your story to them? So take a minute, sort of talk about that, I guess with yourself, or if you're sitting next to somebody, and sort of write down, because it really can be complicated, especially for those of us in rural areas, speaking about progressive issues. So the next thing, and since you're watching this in a video, you can easily just pause if you need a little bit more time. So the next thing is who makes the decisions on these levels. So, you know, if my issue area is getting my town a community center, I'm going to go straight to my city council. That's what I'm going to write down. If mine is, you know, creating a new national park, that's going to go straight to my federal legislators, things like that. So write down who makes the decisions on these issues. And again, pause if you need a little more time while I drink my tea. And so yeah, here's some examples: city, town, county, congressional district, whatever your region. You know, county commissioners are, you know, there's some dark horses that you would never expect. I guess you would expect them to be elected, but you know, they're not as prominent as sort of city council people or Congress people, whatever, like county commissioners or even your district attorney, surprisingly, is an elected official. So with that, now you have sort of a, maybe hopefully you have a template of, you know, what your issue areas are, who makes the decisions, and likely a lot of your issue areas could be addressed at a state level. So what you can do, I've given obviously Colorado because it's the best state to ever be a state. But there's also California. Just search in a Google search your state and then say General Assembly. So if I live in Maryland, just search Maryland General Assembly. It'll pop up. And as it does, you'll be able to see, you know, each state looks different. So, you know, I can also show you the California one. So, this looks very different, but, you know, look at the bills at different committees. So in the state of California, the current committees are, wow, there's a lot. And then there's also subcommittees, and you can, it can get kind of complicated, but you have to look at the schedule, see, you know, what's going where, and then, you know, decide maybe I want to organize a group who can go to the state capitol and testify, probably virtually now in this age, but who can testify and make sure that, you know, these people are heard, and their stories are told in your benefit. So to pause, give you a little bit of time to explore that. You know, take as much time. That can be a deep hole, and I know it can be difficult to navigate. So I want to make sure that you are able to engage with me. So my Instagram, Twitter, and my personal email are here on this slide. Go ahead and take a screenshot, or, you know, write it down or just plug it into your phone, whatever. You know, connect with me. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to, you know, field whatever sort of struggles you might have trying to figure out how to create grassroots change and participating in grassroots democracy. Also, I do want to give credit to some organizations that were included. There's Grand Valley Students United. So I used to be the chair of the Education Committee. Their Instagram and Facebook is here. You saw some of these GVSU students, and then the lobby trip was through Western Colorado Alliance and their program West Slope Youth Vote, which I used to chair and intern for as well. So their Instagram and Facebook is there too, and I think they're probably the best example ever of grassroots democracy, and I will continue to be a big fan of theirs. But again, engage with me, send me DMs, email me if you have questions, or you want to, you know, even just have a conversation about your issue area and, you know, how you can further that in your community on, you know, whatever level it happens to be, town, state, county, federal, whatever. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope, you know, you got something out of it. Again, if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to reach out on any. I'm always on my phone, so I'm there. And I'd really love to hear from you and to hear, you know, what sort of progress this, you know, learning some of these things might have brought for you. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to Women of Wonder and Annalise for having me. It has been such a pleasure. And I'll turn it back over to you, Annalise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your phenomenal presentation, Lily. I learned so much. I did take my notes because it was super inspiring, and yeah, I am so excited. You totally have such a passion that radiates for this subject, and you're changing the world with it. So thank you, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.